Good evening. I want to call the Planning and Zoning Board meeting to order, April 21st, 2014. This is our regular meeting, and first thing we have roll call.
Mrs. Protos?
Here.
Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Carr? Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Mr. Gialusis? Ms. St. Arnold?
Here.
Mr. Vinson?
Here.
Chairman Francis.
Here. Okay, I'd like to call the, we have our minutes for November the 18th, and would like a motion that,
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of November 18th as they stand.
Second.
discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Vinson?
Yes.
Chairman Francis.
Yes. We have next the December 16th, 2013 minutes, and would entertain a motion to accept those.
Point of order, can we take December and January together if there are no,
Well, you can't do that because some people were absent at one and not the other.
What was that?
I know
I'm sorry.
sometimes the commission takes them all together, I didn't know if we could or not. All right,
No,
I move for
we-
December 16th.
No, we do them separately.
Okay, I move for December the 16th minutes to stand.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
I wasn't here then.
Mr. Vinson?
Yes.
Chairman Francis.
Yes. Okay, we have the January 13th minutes.
I'll make a motion that we accept the January 13th minutes as they stand.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
I was absent for that one.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Vinson?
Yes.
Chairman Francis.
Yes. Okay, we will now have our quasi-judicial procedures announcement by our attorney, Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The three items on our agenda tonight are quasi-judicial proceedings. In a quasi-judicial proceeding, this board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At such a hearing, it is not this board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. And I do want to stress this tonight, as I've noticed since I've been staffing this board, that we tend to get a bit far afield from the competent, substantial evidence and relevant evidence into issues of policy, et cetera. So I would like to sort of just guide you back to the competent, substantial evidence standard tonight. If that competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the code, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By that same token, if that evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the code, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. There is an established procedure which will be followed at these hearings. All witnesses must give their testimony under oath. All persons testifying must give their name and address for the record. All testimony and questioning of this hearing must address matters that are relevant and material to the issues under consideration. City staff will present its testimony and evidence first. The applicant will then have an opportunity to cross-examine city staff. The applicant will then present its testimony and witnesses, and city staff will have an opportunity to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses. Members of the public opposing the application will then be given an opportunity to present testimony. After all members of the public speaking in opposition to the application have concluded, members of the public in support of the application will have an opportunity to present testimony. Each member of the public is limited to 4 minutes of testimony. The applicant will then have the opportunity to make a closing argument or summary, after which city staff will be given an opportunity to make a closing argument or summary. Following this, the board will consider the matter. Board members may ask questions of witnesses at this point in the proceedings. A motion will be made and a vote will be taken. At this juncture, I would ask for the board members to disclose any ex parte communications on any of the 3 applications before it tonight.
Yes, yes, sir. I have one. This is in relation to application 14-20 show. I'd gotten a call from Mrs. Katie Samarcas in relation to this application. I discussed it with her that the best thing to do is for her to contact planning and zoning and have that explained to her by the staff at planning and zoning.
All right, do you feel in light of that communication you're still able to render a fair and
Yes.
impartial decision?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I'd ask for any witnesses intending to testify on any of the applications tonight to please stand and be sworn. Do you swear that or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Many thanks. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have our first application is 14-14, Furman, Chevrolet, and Volvo, and we will have our staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item is an annexation application of a little over 11 acres into the city of Tarpon Springs. Property is located at 43520 U.S. Highway 19 North, and the applicant's representative is here tonight. In a nutshell, the applicant has developed plans to improve the existing car dealership, Furman, Chevrolet, and Volvo, that will require additional city water and sewer service. And as you're aware, Ordinance 2006-03 requires that property be annexed if it's contiguous to existing municipal limits and requires either additional city water or sewer service. The applicant is seeking permission to annex and application of the Highway Business Zoning District. The property has a commercial parkway zoning currently in the county. There will be no change in the future land use category of residential office retail. Just as an aside, the amount of the new building area for the dealership is considered sub-threshold, and the city's technical review committee will grant the approval for the site plan once it's found to be in compliance with all city codes, regulations, and policies. As for review criteria, the property is contiguous to existing Tarpon Springs limits on the north, south, east, and west, and this annexation will reduce the size of an existing enclave. We determined that the annexation will have no impact upon the city's public facilities. We've also determined that this application is consistent with the standards for the interlocal agreement, as well as policies for bringing in property in equal or less intensity than identified in the county's comprehensive plan. We've also determined that this annexation is consistent with all other standards. The city's TRC reviewed the application, and you have those review comments in your staff report. As far as public correspondence, we have not received any correspondence from the public on this item. It's our opinion that the application meets all review criteria, and the staff recommendation is to approve the request for annexation, which will be ordinance 2014-07. Secondly, to approve the application of the future land use designation of residential office retail on the Tarpon Springs future land use plan map, which is ordinance 2014-08. And thirdly, to approve the HB Highway Business Zoning District on the official zoning map of Tarpon Springs, which is ordinance 2014-09. I provided a location map, an aerial photograph, a zoning map, a future land use plan map, as well as a boundary survey, a zoning summary from the Pinellas County Code describing the commercial parkway district that the property is currently under, as well as information from the city's Highway Business Zoning District, as well as details on the residential office retail future land use plan category. Are there any questions of me?
We'll start with Mr. Parker.
I really don't have any questions.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
No questions.
Mr. Carr? Mr. Vinson?
Rodney, how did this get to be an enclave? It's surrounded all the way by the city? I mean, how did that happen?
I can only speculate. It obviously happened well before my time here, but I believe at one point the subdivision to the west was may have been part of the county, and as it was developed, it was actually brought into the city, and that left this remaining piece still in the county.
Okay, seems sort of strange, but okay. No other questions, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Ms. Arnold,
No questions.
Mrs. Protus.
Yes, Rodney, this was a very good backup that you gave us on this. It was excellent. With all the information, and you're right about that piece
That's what I was saying.
not coming in at that time.
Right.
Everything came around, and it came up at that time, did that piece of property want or need to be in the city limits? And at that time, the owners said no. And it was a big question, like was it considered a spot zoning, but it wasn't because of the way that it happened. And we really need to get this into the city and get it on our tax
Bring
rolls.
the mic closer to you.
Yes,
The mic.
yeah, I'll go this way. That's it.
Okay, anything else for staff? Okay, we'll have the applicant come forward. Please identify yourself and give us your address, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Good evening, Chairman, board members. My name's Katie Cole, representing the applicant. I'm with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, 311 Park Place, Clearwater, Florida, Suite 240. I don't really have anything to add to Mr. Chapman's presentation that would give any more competent, substantial evidence to this. The staff report certainly goes through each of the criteria. This is a mandated annexation based on the proposed increase in hookups that the site plan project will initiate. So based on the Tarpon Springs Code, the applicant's required to submit this application for this annexation. So that being said, we've had a wonderful experience with staff to date and look forward to developing this property in the city of Tarpon Springs.
Okay, stay right there a minute. Questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. Parker, Mr. Stavropoulos? Mr. Carr?
No question.
Mr. Vincent?
No question.
No
Ms. Arnold?
questions. No.
Mr. Protus?
No.
I don't have questions. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now hear from the audience. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against this application at this time? Is there anyone who wishes to speak for it? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public portion, entertain a motion for this application.
I'll make a motion that we accept application 1414 for Furman Chevrolet and Volvo as it stands.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Vincent?
Do we need just one motion to approve the ordinance or the annexation, or is it going to be any approval of the zoning in a separate motion?
Yeah, unless the maker of the motion has some reason to
No.
distinguish them.
No.
It goes
Together.
package for approval to the commission.
So
Okay, so
one
we're
motion
doing
sufficient,
both
okay.
together?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any objection to that? Any discussion? If not, let's have a roll call.
I've got a question real quick.
Okay.
Since I wasn't here for the whole presentation, do I vote on this?
She just gave the presentation.
Well, I know, since I came in the middle of Rodney, I guess.
Okay, if you have any
I
questions
I was
for-
going to just not vote for this one because I wasn't here for the whole thing. Is that okay to do, or?
No, I'd prefer that you vote.
Okay.
Unless you have
Okay.
a financial conflict.
All right.
You've got the staff report.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, thanks.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes.
Chairman Francis?
Yes. Okay. Best of luck. Thank you. Okay, next we have Musalem, application 14-18 for a conditional use application for a Series 4 COP SRX beer, wine, and liquor license. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of you have been around for a while may remember this property, but we have a new applicant. The property is at 1981 North Pinellas Avenue. It has been several restaurants, in the time that I've been here in 11 years. So now we have another operator that wants to go into the space. And the city's code requires that a conditional use be granted for this type of alcohol license that would allow for the on-premise consumption of beer, wine, and liquor. The standards for review are based on, at least criteria one, are based on a 200-foot minimum distance from a pre-existing church or school of general education. The nearest church to the subject property is Leslie Hale Ministries at 1355 Rainville Park Road. It's about 3,800 feet from the property. Nearest school of general education is the Paul R. Smith Middle School at 1410 Sweetbriar Drive in Holiday. It's about 1.4 miles from the property. In our analysis, we've also determined that there would be no negative impacts as far as functional proximity, the primary interest, the secondary entrance, any presence of minors, and we feel that the granting of the conditional use would provide for an efficient and orderly development pattern in this part of the city. TRC reviewed the application at the April 10th meeting and had no objections. You see the comments there in your staff report. We have not received any public correspondence on this item, and it's our opinion that the application has met our review criteria, and it's our recommendation to approve the conditional use for a 4COP SRX, a license at 1981 North Pinellas Avenue in the Highway Business Zoning District. Provided you a location map showing you the approximate location of the subject property, the middle school, and the nearest church, as well as a location map, an aerial photograph, a zoning map, and a future land use plan map. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have of me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Start with Mr. Parker.
This restaurant, this has had a 4-cop license there previously, has it not?
Yes.
Okay, that's the only question I've got.
Yeah, Mr. Stavropoulos,
No questions at this time.
Mr. Carr, Mr. Vincent,
No questions.
Mr. Arnold,
No questions.
Mr. Protas.
Yes. Because it was a restaurant and they served liquidations and before, did you check any incidental reports there that they've had in the neighborhood or around there with previous business?
The police, during our TRC discussion, did not bring up any incidents with the
That's-
previous operators.
Well, I hope they stay in there. It's been turned over quite a bit.
Mr. Chairman, I've noticed over a period of years that when we have something like this come up, we're always asking the applicant what are their hours of operation and when they plan to be open, et cetera, if they're going to have entertainment. Is that something that can be asked by planning and zoning, or does that have to wait until we actually hear the presentation by the applicant?
Well, if you want to ask those sorts of questions, the applicant's here to answer those for you.
Okay, I just wanted trying to, streamline it a little bit.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? Is the applicant here? Yeah, please come up and give us your name and address, please. You have 10 minutes?
It's his business.
How you doing? My name is Michael Musallam, and that's my brother Jake Musallam. And we already have a restaurant right up the street from there. It's called Holiday Family Restaurant. And apparently, because of our restaurant, whoever opens this restaurant is not succeeding. And since this restaurant is in better shape than our restaurant, we decided to take this one over. And when my lease runs out at the other one, I will just stay here, And we already have beer and wine at the other place. And liquor, even though we're adding liquor, it's still not going to be that big of a thing because we're mainly a restaurant. And we're going to be open from 7 to 9, 7 days. And we'll see how it goes.
Okay, stay right there, see if
Okay.
you have any questions. Mr. Parker,
I have no questions.
Mr. Stavropoulos,
No questions.
Mr. Carr,
None.
Mr. Vincent, Mr. Arnold,
No.
Mr. Protas.
Now I know who you are. You have an excellent restaurant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I've seen you
Yeah.
there.
I look like I eat. You have an excellent restaurant, and it's very good, and you run a very fine establishment. I
Thank
wish
you.
you a lot of luck with this one.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, have a seat, please.
Thanks.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak against this application? Is there anyone who wants to speak for it? Seeing none, I'll close the business, the public portion, and entertain a motion.
I move for the acceptance of application 14-18 with its conditional use.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Vinson?
Yes.
Chairman Francis?
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck.
Good luck.
Okay, we have application 14-20, Shoal. This is a rezoning application, R60 to CRM 7.5. We'll have staff report at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is at 115 South Spring Boulevard. It's a little over a third of an acre, and it overlooks Spring Bayou. There is a home on the property, as most of you are aware. It's a little less than 6,000 square feet, and it was built in 1916. The request is to rezone from R60, which is a 1 and 2 family residential district, to CRM 7.5, which allows for a host of other residential and other uses. The genesis of the request is to eventually, if it is approved, to allow the applicant to operate a bed and breakfast at this location. What I'm going to try and do is walk you through some of the background as I understand it on the application, just so bear with me for a little while. The R60 district was created with the adoption of Ordinance 97-38 in November of '97. The R60 district was originally created in response to work that the city and other partners were doing to address some concerns in the Union Academy neighborhood. And out of that plan was a recommendation that the city create a new zoning district that recognized the assets and problems of the area. So that work was done, and then a large chunk of the Union Academy area was rezoned to R60. Then in December of '99, the Board of Commissioners adopted 99-33, which you have a copy of that ordinance in your backup, which rezoned about 4 acres of property bounded on the north by Lemon Street, and then a little bit east of Banana Street and Lime Street and MLK, and then on the west on Bay Street. And the purpose of that rezoning at the time to R60 was to add value to the existing homes and property by protecting the established character of the area and promoting compatible infill development of single-family homes, while also bringing all properties into the area, into conformance with the minimum dimensional criteria for buildable property. Part of that area was previously zoned RM15 and CRM 7.5, and those zoning districts made most of those single-family detached lots in there non-conforming because those districts required a minimum of 60 foot of lot width and 7,000 square feet of lot area. Most of those lots in the area were platted in the early 1900s, and most of those only had about 50 feet of lot width and a little over 5,700 square feet of lot area. And then in 2001, the Board of Commissioners adopted Ordinance 2001-15, which you also have in your backup, which rezoned a larger chunk of property, a little less than 15 acres, from RM15 and CRM 7.5 to R60, and that also was inclusive of the subject property. The effective parcels of the rezoning were adjacent to those that were rezoned in 1999, using the same justification and analysis that was used previously. This property isn't your typical sized property for that area. It's actually got 125 feet of lot width and over 14,000 square feet of lot area. Again, and the request would eventually lead to the establishment of a bed and breakfast that the applicant has said would only be in operation from November through April of each year. The criteria is broken down into two sections. One has to deal with any comprehensive plan amendments that would be applicable. In this case, there are none. The land use would still remain, future land use would still remain as a residential urban. As far as the zoning map amendment, we have determined that the request is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and specifically, we have goal statements and policy statements from the future land use element dealing with promoting the tourist economy, dealing with the needs of the public facilities, and providing a diversification of uses in the downtown area, and having compact and contiguous growth patterns. Criteria 2 deals with the available uses that are appropriate and compatible with the existing and planned uses in the area. What I've tried to do in this section is to give you a breakdown of the uses that are permitted and conditional in both zoning districts. And you'll see in your staff report that there's a lot of overlap in both the R60 and CRM 7.5, but you look on page 4, those last 8 uses, which would include the lodging facility or bed and breakfast use, are not permitted in the R60, where they are conditional in the CRM 7.5. Further, in looking at the general area, there are 3 lodging facility uses in the area. The Tarpon Inn, which is at 110 West Tarpon Avenue. It's about 250 feet from the property. The second facility is a Sun Bay Motel, which is at 57 West Tarpon Avenue. It's about 215 feet away. And there is the third lodging facility, the 1910 Inn, which is at 32 West Tarpon Avenue. It's a little less than 500 feet from the subject property. And I provided a map showing you the subject property location and the location of those other transient accommodations. Again, we've determined that the amendment would provide for efficient and orderly development, considering the impact upon growth patterns and the cost of the city, to provide public facilities, and this rezoning, if granted, would not impair or impact the city's ability to provide those said facilities. TRC reviewed the application at the April 10th meeting, and you see the comments there in your staff report. As far as public correspondence, we in the planning department did receive one phone call from someone in opposition to the application. Based on our analysis of the application, our recommendation is to approve the requested zoning amendment from R60 to CRM 7.5 for the property located at 115 South Spring Boulevard. I've given you information on the R60 district as well as the CRM district. You have a location map, aerial photograph of the area, a zoning map, a future land use plan map, a copy of ordinance 99-33, as well as a copy of ordinance 2001-15. And you also have a boundary survey of the property. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, wait, no comments, please. Please wait. Okay,
I've got one question before
hang
we
on, I'm
start.
gonna start with Mr. Parker.
Okay.
Mr. Parker, do you have any questions for staff?
I know the area down there, and I know there's some motels there in the area. And I know there's no bed and breakfast there in the area that I'm aware of. I know what my personal feelings are about this, but my understanding is my personal feelings, of course, have absolutely nothing to do with what the vote is here today. Is this not what they originally did the changed it to the R64 is to prevent something like this from happening? Wasn't that the purpose of the R60?
While I wasn't here at the time, it appears, yes, it was done to make sure that you had your smaller lot sizes being able to be developed as single-family uses, and to, I assume, to prevent duplexes, triplexes, and other more intense residential or other types of uses in the area.
And I guess this may be a question I'll have to ask of the people when they come up. How many people are they thinking about boarding there, and is there enough parking there on the property for the situation, for making that a bed and breakfast? I don't remember having a tremendous amount of parking there.
My understanding, they would have 3 beds in the, or 3 bedrooms in the bed and breakfast.
So that would be potentially 3 vehicles plus the vehicles of the owners that live there.
Right.
Is there enough parking? Because I know that street there is so thin, there's no way you can park out on the street there at all.
No. If you look at the boundary survey, you'll see that there is a circular driveway as well as a covered carport, and it appears that it could accommodate those. But again, we're getting into conditional use areas where, again, this is a 2-step process, if you will. The rezoning, if it gets rezoned, then they're going to come back to the city for approval of the conditional use.
So the questions I'm asking is more for the city council than it is for planning.
It's more
and zoning.
appropriate for a conditional use. You're talking about the functional aspects of operating a bed and breakfast and any conditions that can ameliorate those.
Then, very good, then I have nothing more.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
My questions were answered.
Mr. Carr?
Mr. Attorney, my parents own a property that backs up to this property. I have no ownership in it, but I grew up there, and I have no issue with being my own person in that aspect. So is there any issues I need to be aware of?
Do you personally stand to gain financially whether this project is approved or denied?
No.
You have no conflict.
Okay. Mr. Chapman, did this go to the historic preservation at all, since it's in the historic preservation district?
No rezonings go to the Heritage Preservation Board.
Okay. Is it just part of code then, how that works? Okay. Looking at it, permitted uses and conditional uses with the 25 or the R60 versus the
CRM.
Yeah. A lot of the conditional uses are already there that are, like you mentioned earlier in the staff report. So, for instance, if someone wanted to do that, change the conditional use of the property, they could do that currently if it's already an R60 listed. So, for instance, if they want to put a school there, they could put a school there currently with the R60.
Yes.
It just has to go through conditional use approval through the city process.
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was just still the same.
Everything else?
Yeah, I'm just looking through.
Okay.
What concerns the city may have with, is there a concern with the city if this changes zoning aspects for other zoning issues around the bayou or the Golden Crescent or anything along those lines?
Well, a couple things. One would be you want to make sure that if the rezoning takes place and the conditional use is granted, that the conditional use has the appropriate conditions to ensure that it does not become a nuisance to their neighbors. We would also like to ensure that the operation of the facility is consistent with whatever conditions. If it is a 6-month period, then we need to make sure that that facility is operating as a bed and breakfast for those 6 months only.
During the conditional use, you're able to stipulate more details about it.
Yes, you're able to basically apply any conditions you see fit that would ameliorate any inconsistencies or any issues with the use from its adjacent properties.
Is there an issue with just rezoning this property and not the other properties surrounding it?
Well, that's a good question. There is probably another way to approach this. Another option would have been to consider adding lodging facilities into the R60 district as a conditional use and place additional criteria on that evaluation. So that way you're opening it up to all the properties within that area and making anyone, or basically leveling the playing field and making anyone who wanted to go through that process come in and have their application evaluated and apply any conditions that the city saw fit.
So why do we go this route then that we're taking?
That was just the route that the planning department suggested to the applicant.
Okay.
Sorry about that, y'all.
I don't have any further questions right now. Thank you.
Rodney, I was wondering, this particular property is going from one zoning to another, and this is a historic district, is it not?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what would prevent somebody else from wanting to do the same thing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Are we setting a precedent?
Again, as you know, we've talked about many times since I've been here with the board, every application stands on its own. It has its own merit, it has its own specific physical characteristics, has its own specific operational characteristics. So what the commission may do in one instance would not bind them to adjudicate a similar application in the same fashion.
But it is possible for somebody else to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Is the owner going to live in the house, do you know?
As far as I know, but he's here if you want to ask him.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Vincent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a long time since I was in law school, but way back in the back of my recesses of my mind, the term spot zoning comes to mind, and like I said, that was a long time ago. I don't know if that's still something. I remember that being sort of a negative thing or a negative concept back in the cases that I studied way back then. Can you bring me up to date? I mean, that was 30 years ago or so.
That's one of my questions.
We didn't, well, in grad school, we did talk about those sorts of issues, and the best I can talk to that issue is, I guess it's frowned upon because it gives the appearance that you're giving a special benefit or privilege to one property owner versus another. And in this case, as I said before, anyone that has a property that they wish to operate a bed and breakfast, they can come in and apply for it, just like the applicant is. So that's the that's sort of the way we rationalized, this approach to this request. Again, the applicant is only applying for the rezoning, and that privilege or that ability is open to everyone.
I'm going to weigh
Other
on spot
questions?
zoning just because the question was raised. A lot of the spot zoning analysis has to do with compatibility, and as I look at the staff report and note that there are several similar uses in that area, that's one of the factors to militating against spot zoning in this case, because you've got that same type of use in a very close proximity, and also a detriment to the neighborhood, which in light of the similar uses.
Mike?
I'm sorry? No, I'm giving the board legal advice.
Okay, wait, please. Let me call you to order. You all have a chance to speak. No, just, we want order. Order.
Speaking out of order.
I'm giving the board legal advice on spot zoning.
Okay. Look, if people are not going to stop, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay, okay. There are two different things going on here.
Well, move up front if you can't
Okay,
hear something here.
if you can take the mic off and bring it closer.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. The
Okay.
analysis of spot zoning looks at, number one, the size of the spot, the compatibility of that spot with the surrounding area. And as I've mentioned, there are several other uses. I'm not testifying, I'm just letting you know that this map shows several other similar uses in that area. The benefit to the owner, and the detriment to the immediate neighborhood. Those are four factors that generally are at play in spot zoning. You can do with those what you will. If you'd like me to render an opinion, I'm happy to do that.
I just wanted a refresher about spot zoning, because I knew it had a negative connotation when I was back in law school and first learned about it. And I just,
Yeah,
wanted to see if
and
that's
again,
still an issue.
I don't want to be accused of testifying, but the typical manifestation of spot zoning is you have, one clear delineated zoning, and then one property rezoned or upzoned or right in the center, generally, and then that use is nowhere else, or that zoning district is nowhere else within the vicinity. That's the classic iteration of it. And again, I don't want to. Law school is a little bit more recent for me than for you, and so my memory's a little bit more fresh. So that's the way it was taught to me.
Your age difference.
Can you talk about those four things one more time for me? You just addressed them.
Yeah, the size of the spot or the size of the parcel, the compatibility of that parcel with the surrounding area, the benefit that the owner might receive by the rezoning, and the detriment to the immediate neighborhood.
I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Arnold,
No questions.
Mr. Protus,
Yes, I have some history to give. We have new members on the board, and I
please
have
bring the mic
some
close
information
to
to
you.
give. This is on the Golden Crescent. The Golden Crescent is the crown jewel of Tarpon Springs, with all our big homes. I remember when a board member here wanted to put his law firm behind his house on the bayou, and I remember who led the crusade not to do it, and he didn't get to do it because no businesses on the Golden Crescent. Then in the late 80s and through the 90s, and as much as 10 years ago, Mrs. Galarakis wanted to sell her house, which became the Stansel House, and two potential buyers came to the city, wanted to put a B&B in, and they said no. And you will not have an opportunity to have it turned over because it's not zoned for that. Fine. You look at the length of the Golden Crescent and the beautiful homes there and our historic district there. The Gondolier Motel, when it came in, there wasn't a big planning and zoning program at that time. And they came in as a motel, and then the other one across the street was built many, many years ago also. But these have become residential places now. And there are a lot of incident reports on these two establishments. The Giuliani home for years stood empty. It is not on the Golden Crescent. It is on Tarpon Avenue. The Golden Crescent starts with the road that goes around the bayou. Historically, in our history and our historic designation in Tarpon, that's what we named with the title. As far as some of the uses in this with the R60, you're not going to see those in that area. You're not going to see them in the fruit section of Tarpon Springs, which is historic, which backs up right there. Olga and I are going to disagree on this, but I remember this extensively. When R60 came in, we put it in to save and protect what we have there. And there were people on the Golden Crescent at that time associated with the city that fought hard to have it. In fact, one even got the park for us where there was a home and brought it before the commission so we can establish and preserve the park there. I feel that this is a spot zoning, wanting to have it for just a few months out of the year. And once you do that, you're opening up a can of worms. And I think one thing we're going to have to decide tonight, do we want to stand behind the historic value of that area or open it wide for everyone. And when they've denied 3 or 4 others, where do we stand with approving this? And you have to decide what you want for the future of this community there. When you did your technical review, what were the incidental reports on this? Because the police are always down there at the motel and in the one across the street all the time. So what reports did you get?
No, it's fairly common knowledge about the amount of incidents at the Tarpon Inn and the Sun Bay Motel. So I agree with you.
I think we have to look at the parking in this area, and we have to look at what's going to be happening down there. There were individuals who wanted to buy lots and put different types of homes and look at things and businesses, and the city has said no before. Do we want to protect the cultural heritage with approving this or not? Because once you do it, you're going to lose it, and you're not going to get it back. Remember that. We've discussed this before. Once something's lost, it doesn't come back. And you talk about all the uses here. It's not going to work on the Golden Crescent area there. I understand that it had been used before for renting of rooms, and I don't know if the city allowed that to happen at all. But I think we need to take a long look at what we're doing here. We're changing what we've got. We're changing our historic value there, and that's what I stand at. And when they wouldn't let others do it, and someone led the charge on that, how are you going to justify giving it today? I like Mr. Scholl. He's a nice man. I've known him for years. But I don't like this. This is destroying. It's a cancer on our historic. And we've had to fight for everything this last 2 years, historic for Tarpon, to preserve. And that's what we've got to look at. I remember when Wayne Keene wanted to build his house, we went to great lengths to fight him on his plans because it was in a historic district. Great. I remember when the property owner, two properties down from him, wanted to put in a motel. They told him not to even try it. When he wanted to put in condos, he was told, don't even consider it from the city. It's a no-go because of what's there. So this is what we have to look at. And the city's going to have to take a stand on the Gondolier Motel, and they're going to have to take a stand on the hotel across the street, because it's not a residential rental facilities, both of them, but that's what they're using them for, and it's wrong. And we need to look very hard at this. R60 was put in to protect what we've got there. People have put a lot of money into those beautiful homes, and they keep them nice. Not saying that a B&B won't keep it nice, but that's opening a business, and that's what we have to look at. You know, we all respect the applicant and what he wants to do. He's been away from here for a long time. He hasn't realized what we've been working on all these years to protect what we have. You know, and the applicant was a big supporter of historic preservation also. The people on the corner supporting him, they've put hundreds of thousands of dollars into that home and has given us something to be proud of. But they have to fight and listen to what goes on up the street. The only one that doesn't have any baggage is the Tarpon Inn, the Giuliani home. Then you have the Sykes home. Then you have the Captain's home. We have to look at what we're doing on this board. And we're on this board to protect the community, not to make money for them. It's hard tonight, but the truth is the truth. And that's what you've got to look at. What are we doing? And I respect him for what he wants to do, but for a few months out of the year, that's going to impact everything else in that area. Everything. You've got the Ennis paintings. Look at the city's historic home there. Everything that we've got hinges on the zoning. And there are those that are just waiting. And I think some people are going to come back and say, well, you didn't give it to us, so where do we stand? And there's people waiting to sell their homes if this goes through, because they're going to want to do the same thing. And let's take a good, long look at what we're doing. And it is a conditional use. It's a conditional use, and it is like a spot zoning, whether you want to call it that or not. It is. And we have to stand up and do what's right and say, let's protect what we have, and let's stand for what we have. You know, once it's gone, like I just told you, you're not going to get it back. And I'll have something more to say later on.
Okay, Mr. Burris, Mr. Carr, you have a question for staff?
I just have one other question for staff. With the smart code and the historic district, I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure it's a wood framed house. Let's just say something happens 15 years from now and old houses just catch fire at times. And then there's no more house in that property. What are we looking at for options if we rezone this? Is it going to go through the Historic Preservation Board again?
Yes.
And then
The new
there's gonna be
construction
limitations
aspect of
on
it
that
would-
also still, right?
Yes.
Okay, 1 second. Ms. Protus, let's give Ms.
Rodney, I have a
General.
question for you. If we pass this part of it tonight, there still is a possibility when it comes before us again as
A conditional
to-
use.
to- that it would not pass. Is
That's
that correct?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Protus?
But that's not going to happen. And let's remember, this house is for sale. And we don't know who it's going to be sold to, and we don't know if they're going to come back and say, we want something year-round, and what's going to happen to the residencies around that house, that beautiful home, that we're very thankful that Mr. Scholl gave us, because he built it up from the bottom up. It's beautiful. We're very proud of it in this community. But let's be very, very cautious. And once we go one step, you can't back. It's going to be very hard to backtrack.
Mr. Vincent, you have a question?
No.
Mr. Parker?
I'd like to ask another question of you all down there.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
And I agree with Ms. Protos. I would hate to see this happen to the house. It's a real centerpiece down there, really. It's a beautiful place. What I want to make sure I do is I want to make sure I do the right thing as a board member. And tonight, as a planning and zoning board member, I can only go on the legalities of it. I can't go on my own opinion. So I'd like to ask the lawyer if it appears that they have met the criteria here for a yes vote. My heart wants to say no, but it appears that it has met the criteria to say yes. And then I have to assume or hope that the city council people,
Right here, it's
who are the ones that are able to ask these questions, will come up with a different answer. Is that basically what I'm looking at here?
What I'm going to advise the entire board is this. Number one, you are passing tonight for approval on a zoning map amendment, not on a conditional use for any type of use for this property. Your criteria for review, as Mr. Chapman went through in detail, are found in section 207.03, sub A 1 through 4 of the city's zoning code. It's not my place to pass on evidence as to what's been presented. You need to decide for each individual board member whether the competent substantial evidence meets those criteria, those review criteria contained that I just identified. I would suggest to you from a legal perspective, if you don't believe that the competent substantial evidence has met those standards, that you identify those deficiencies in the evidence.
All right. Thank you.
And to answer, I think what your fundamental question was, yes, if you believe that the competent substantial evidence supports the criteria that were identified, then yes, you are required to vote in favor of the application.
But
And-
we
and-
haven't
and
heard
the
any
same is
evidence
true as
yet.
well. I'm sorry?
We haven't heard any evidence yet other than the staff report.
Correct.
Well,
Correct.
we will, okay. Any other questions before we have the applicant come forth? Okay, Mr. Schultz.
Yes, there's one thing, sir, on page 2.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Okay. Go ahead.
It says the subject property the applicant is requesting to rezone his property to CRM-7.5 which allows lodging facilities as a conditional use. Shouldn't the conditional use come first before the rezoning?
No, because the way the property is currently zoned, it's not even available to them to apply
I know,
for.
but that's because of the way it's written here. But I'm asking you the question. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Scholl, go ahead and give us.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Donald Scholl. I'm with my wife, Lisa Riggs. There's a couple errors in the report I didn't want to quarrel with, but the house was built in 1885, not 1916, and I wish it was 5,800 square feet, but it's more like 4,800, and it depends on how you measure it. I don't want to get crazy with the parking issue, but I had 3 kids. They had 3 cars, and we have 2 cars in the carport. That's 5. We had that for years and years and years, and we never had a parking problem. And we'll never have more than 5 cars there because there's only 3 rooms to rent. So when I restored this house in 1975, I started. This was hanging on the front porch. It used to have jagged ends. Now, Boogie probably would remember. And inside the house, there were numbers on the doors. So at any rate, this was a rooming house at one time. I have had people tell me that. The front of the house, nobody had lived there, I was told, in 14 years, and what I believe that's true. It wasn't. In the back, it was 8 years. I had a carpenter and a painter there for 3 years straight until I brought in a crew to finish this. I was told by multiple parties that Ruth Clark Capsalis was seriously considering tearing this house down. And it was Ed Hoffman, Colonel Sally, Granville Noblet, and the other responsible citizens that talked her out of tearing the house down. And that was why that had that, if you remember the gray paint that was on it, somebody donated the paint, and they just mixed up all their paint together and just gave it to them so they could protect the house. I've had, for fundraisers over the years, probably close to 10,000 people go through that house to give back to the community, to various charities. And Anita, to make the innuendo that I would rent that house out to the kind of people that are staying in those motels that I've been fighting, and everybody was
That's not
just.
what I'm saying, Dawn.
Well, thank you, because that's hurtful.
Not what I'm saying.
When I started the restoration, I was the first one. The Tarpon house was always in pretty good shape. Alice Hollis's house, who is now Mary Dianexis, and they have apartments in the back of both of them, and they're kept nice. Every other house was in disrepair. I was the first one that started. I didn't finish first. Mary Dianexi beat me, and Billy Howard beat me with the corner house down there. And at any rate, when we do the B&B, we take the people and we screen them, and we send them to our restaurants here in Tarpon Springs. It's a wonderful asset for them, and they see this area, and almost without exception, they comment and they say, "We're going to tell our friends about this, because this is really a terrific place." So I have a letter I'm going to put in from Robin Carr. Put this into the record. She's a neighbor. I have my other 2 neighbors on either side of the property. The one that just purchased, they told me they have, from the Capsalis family house, that they have no objection to it. And I don't think anybody else is going to see it other than see the same 5 cars that we've had parked there from time to time. That's if we've got a full load of people. So I have really given my heart and my wallet to this house. It's been on the market for almost 8 years. Now, you want to talk about something that takes away from your property values? You got a house that's got a for sale sign on it, and I've reduced that price by 60% at least. It's not a healthy thing for the community, and I don't know if I sold it what the next guy is going to do. but he's going to have to meet the requirements. When I went in and met, and when Rodney mentioned tonight that we could have amended this R60 conditional use, I wouldn't even have to do the rezoning. I respect the zoning because it's a requirement of the city, but all I want to do is put a B&B in there. I don't care about going back to 7.5 units an acre or whatever, but I was told this was the procedure to go. If there's a shorter cut to this, amend the conditional use, leave the zoning the same, and just put the B&B under the R60 conditional use, if the commission will do that, I'd be more than happy to do that. I'm not out to maximize the zoning of this property. After everything I've put into this over all these years and the sweat and blood equity, the last thing I would want to do is have this piece of property screwed up. Thank you.
Stay there a minute, Mr. Scholes. I want to see.
Yes.
Do you have any
Oh,
questions
yes.
for the applicant?
I guess really the only question I really have is, and you may not even know the answer to this, I was never aware that that was a rental place to begin with, and when I say that, you know, the rooms were rented there, et cetera. Do you know how long ago that was, and for how long that was?
I don't. I bought the house in 1975. The numbers were on the doors, and this sign was hanging on the front porch.
Okay.
It had a slightly different, and so I have no idea. I know somebody checked their city records and they couldn't find it. Probably back then they didn't have, licenses to have a rooming house or whatever it was. But it certainly was not uncommon back at that time to have, rooming houses.
One other question. You said that one of your neighbors has apartments in the back of the house. Is that right there on Bayou as well?
Yeah. Well, Tarpon have apartments in the back of their house. One, very nice one. Mary Dinexi's got like 6 apartments behind hers.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
And of course, then we have the apartments down the street at the tennis courts. So there's a lot of apartments.
Okay. Mr. Stavropoulos, can we hang on a minute, please? Mr. Stavropoulos, you have any questions for Mr. Scholl?
No question.
Mr. Carter?
Is the property going to remain for sale while you operate the bed and breakfast?
Is it going to remain in my name?
No, for sale. Like, are you trying to?
Yes.
still
Oh, yes.
promote it?
Mhm.
Okay.
The
Are you
idea
gonna-
is maybe the bed and breakfast will help sell the property, and maybe it'll just bring more people in, and we'll be able to sell it that way.
That's the kind of
This
idea.
has been
that
a
is-
very frustrating, long 7 years.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Take care of a house like that.
Is the plan to promote it as a bed and breakfast for sale? Is that the aspect?
Yeah, we would.
Okay.
Yeah, in part. I mean, it's
Yeah,
both.
it's an option.
And there was another area. This is a 3-story house. It's 3 stories.
Mr. Vincent?
I'm glad you clarified the date it was built. I thought it was in the 1880s, Don. I appreciate that. Yeah, 1885.
Well, he presided over the meeting that incorporated Tarpon Springs in
That's-
87.
That's what I
so-
recalled, and
Yeah.
that's when I heard the 1916, I said, that can't be right.
Yeah, no, that's
But,
from the tax records.
And I vaguely remember that sign, too. If you said it was hanging on there, is going by there a lot when I was a kid. And there were a lot of homes that had rooms for let back in the day.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
That was
Yes.
very common. I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Arnold?
No questions.
Mr.
I want
Prose?
to clarify, when I talked about the gondolier and the other motel, I was not inferring that you would have those type of people in your
Thank
home,
you.
because I knew for sure you would not. But I'm telling you about what can happen if this opens up and what's going to go on. And the garage apartments were built years ago when those houses were built because the hired help that lived in those homes and helped the people lived in those. They were
I don't
part
doubt
and
that.
part of the family.
Yeah.
And that's why they were there. You couldn't build them there now, and you couldn't tear them down because of the historic district in the area. So let's clarify why they had the garage apartments. And when you had the house, if that sign was there, I'm 72, so it was a lot longer than that, because I remember the house was down to the floor, there was nothing there, and you built it from the ground up. So in those days, if they did rent a room, if they did, There was no zoning back then. There was nothing. And that's why we created the zoning board, and the zoning for these areas is for protection. And as far as the motel on the other end, across from the tennis court, I remember the fight that night. And I can tell you who was in office when that passed. But it is not on the crown of the Golden Crescent. You have to realize what the Golden Crescent is. It's the crown there at the bayou. And in those days when those apartments were built, the zoning was different, and then we changed the zoning to protect what we had there. And that's the history and more of all of this. So, it depends on what the board members want to do. It's your obligation to protect. And from what you just told me, so you've been renting rooms there. When you said they had no problem, people that come there, you sent them to the restaurants.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So you went ahead and you were renting.
Yeah, we were just kind of testing the market, and then things started to look okay, so we,
Okay.
you know.
Well, if it was
So we're here.
wrong, you should have known it was wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Scholes?
Thank you.
Thanks, please. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask the audience, is anyone who wishes to speak against it to please come forward, give us your name and address.
Michael Kuskudis. My office is 623 East Tarpon Avenue. I represent John Theophilus, who is the owner of 127 Spring Boulevard, 2 doors down from Mr. Scholl. And first of all, I want to commend Mr. Scholl for his being candid about what you're trying to do. Obviously, my client objects to it. I agree with some of the comments on the board that you are creating a slippery slope if you pass this. Take Miss Anexi's house, for example. Her house is large. She's got a ton of bedrooms, probably sitting empty. She's got adequate parking. If she wanted to create a bed and breakfast, it would be like a hotel. That's how big it is. Same thing with Mr. Vincent. That is, his kids are gone, and I'm sure he's got a bunch of spare bedrooms. He could create, and he's got adequate parking to create something that would be a hotel type of a bed and breakfast. And I understand Mr. Scholl's concern and what the direction he's trying to go. My client objects to it completely. I think if you wanted to change, I do consider it spot zoning. You're doing a carve-out just for that particular piece of property. And I think that's fundamentally unfair to everybody else on the bayou. It's fundamentally unfair for everybody that lives in that R60 district. If you wanted to do it and be fair about it, then you should go back and change the whole R60 to that type of zoning, not just carving out one piece. We talk about conditions, okay? Mr. Scholl wants to have one of the conditions maybe 6 months, but anybody else coming in or any other properties can have other conditions. And whatever you do has to be fair for everybody in the area, not just a carve out. On your analysis, and the city's analysis, it says the R60 district was created to add value to the existing homes and property by protecting the established character of the area and promoting compatible infill development of single-family homes. That was changed from the type of zoning that Mr. Scholl is looking for. So he's asking this board to take a step backwards from the zoning that it was changed to. And we talk about the city's recommendation for approval, but some of the criteria is subjective in nature. It's not an objective test. Some of it is subjective. So to the extent that the city goes through its analysis and makes subjective decisions based on the criteria. There's no objective test to some of those criteria. You know, bear with me while I check my notes, but in essence, what you would be doing is you would be allowing commercial enterprise within the R60 district is what you'd be doing. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against this? Yes, ma'am. Please give us your name. You can take that mic off. It comes off. Make it easier for yourself and just pull it off. I think if you just pull upwards. Okay,
Hi.
please give us your name and address.
My name is Dr. Carolyn Root. I live at 203 South Spring Boulevard. I know the Shoals well, and they've been operating a bed and breakfast informally for a while now to test the waters, as Don said, and it has not had any adverse effects on our neighborhood. And my guess is most people probably didn't even know it until they started petitioning for a bed and breakfast. But that's not the discussion here. The discussion here is how we zone that property. And that is my concern. You may not know this, but I am on the Historical Preservation Board. I've been on it for 2 years. And it has my experience that it is frighteningly easy to have a historic home torn down. I saw that experience with 164 North Spring Boulevard. Gone. Like that. I was the one no vote on that board.
Thank you.
Here's my big issue. If there's an alternative to the rezoning question, it should be pursued. That's due diligence from the city, and I'm really, really shocked that it has not been pursued, because that should be on the table in front of you as well, instead of giving you this binary option on what's in front of you today. You do have choices. You can send the city back to do their homework, to present you all your options, including one that might be much better for the neighborhood, and I strongly suggest and request you do that. So my recommendation is to take a long view and not give up the historical preservation aspects of this property due to the R60 zoning. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else wishes? Please come forward and give us your name, address.
My name is Kathy Theophilus, and I'm one of the residents that lives there. I live at 127 South Spring Boulevard. One of the reasons we bought this home is because of the historical preservation of it, and because it is on the Crescent. We take pride in our homes. We love them. We don't want it torn down. And of course, I'm objecting, I'm sorry, to a bed and breakfast, because I don't know. I've seen what happens at the Tarpon Inn and across the street, and I sure don't want that as my next door neighbor. I'm sorry I'm against it, but I'm saying it like it is. And please take it into consideration. I'm sure that if you had a home right next door, I don't know what your feelings are, but I sure don't want it, because I don't know who's going to come. I know you, Mr. Schultz, said that you do screen your applicants. I'm sure you do, but there's still a lot of attorneys, professional people. They do bad things too. Thank you.
Please give us your name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Tarpon at 22 North Spring Boulevard. Our house is the Yellow House. It's immediately north of the horrible Tarpon Inn. couple of things I'd like to talk about. First of all, this is definitely spot zoning, and I'll demonstrate that. And I am a professional planner for over 30 years, so I do have professional experience to speak to this. The only CRM zoning other than this site is the Craig Park. Why that's zoned CRM 7.5, I don't know. There's no reason for it. Maybe it's a leftover. But when the city did the right thing in 1999 and 2000 and zoned 15 blocks or so, almost 30 acres, out of the CRM into the R60, and now he's proposing to take it back. So what I want to focus you guys on, I think several other people have said it too, we personally are not opposed to bed and breakfast. I think we stay in bed and breakfast. I think in the right site they can be appropriate. It may work in this site, I'm not for sure. But that's not what you're being asked to consider tonight. You're being asked to consider the CRM zoning district. And there are a variety of uses in that district that will be extremely detrimental to our neighborhood. Let me just read a few of those that are not allowed in R60. So the new uses that would be allowed if this zoning is passed is congregate care, daycare center for more than 5 children or adults, emergency shelter, residential treatment facilities, and recovery homes. And they all have slightly different definitions, but here's the definitions of those per your code. They treat abused children or adults. A residential treatment facility treats alcoholism, drug abuse, and mental illness, and it's a residential facility. In other words, the folks live there while they're undergoing that treatment. A recovery home treats criminals, delinquents, mental or emotional illness, and drug addiction. That is not what you find in that residential neighborhood today, and it's not appropriate for our residential neighborhood. I'd also like to point out that in the staff report on page 4, there's a statement made that there are 3 inns within 500 feet, and they have not created any compatibility issues. Well, I'd like to disagree with that. I don't see any evidence in the report that confirms that, but living right next to the Tarpon Inn and across the street from the Sun Bay, I can tell you that that is absolutely not true. The 1910 Inn is a wonderful neighbor. They've done a beautiful job with the building, and it's a true bed and breakfast with an on-site manager. The other 2 uses create all sorts of deviant behavior. We've had cops in our yard on multiple occasions, picking up needles, drug paraphernalia, and other paraphernalia that I can't say out loud. And they are from the Tarpon Inn, which borders our property to the south and to the east. So they are definitely not good neighbors, and to use those as a reason to approve this is just improper in my mind. First of all, finally, let me just go through the standards, and they're in your report, and I just disagree with the summary that has been given. This amendment, this rezoning, is not consistent with the comp plan because it will have a negative effect on the historic district. It proposes uses that are not in the historic district today, and definitely not on the Crescent. The uses that the property may be put are compatible with existing and planned uses in the area. Again, this is a single-family neighborhood. Yes, there are garage apartments, but it is a single-family neighborhood. There are no commercial uses. There are no recovery homes. There are no treatment facilities. There is none of that. The amendment will not provide for orderly development because it will, if one of those other uses, like a recovery center, a treatment facility, goes into that site at some point, first of all, they're going to request to demolish the historic building. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, there will be additional calls for service on a narrow road with only one way in and out. And the final one is that it would impact the capacity to provide public facilities. Really, I believe the main issue is going to be provision of police and fire service. So it does not meet the criteria for approval, the 4 criteria. Also, your attorney listed 4 criteria that evaluate whether it's spot zoning. First of all, the size of the spot. Again, the only area that's CRM in this area is the park. So clearly, I mean, the size of the spot is small, and the only other CRM is not even CRM use. The compatibility of with the surrounding area, I think I've talked about pretty extensively. This would not be a compatible zoning with the area. It would be a detriment to our neighborhood to have one of those uses pushed into the middle of a residential area. And then the benefit the owner would receive, again, he is getting a benefit of a whole variety of uses that are not available to anyone else in that entire neighborhood. And we have no problem with Don or Lisa. They've done a beautiful job with their property. I was shocked to find out that they're operating a bed and breakfast illegally, so I have a problem with that. But I'm sure there's another way to logically go about allowing bed and breakfast in certain situations without rezoning. And I would encourage you to, for example, you can add bed and breakfast as a conditional use in the R60, and then they come through, whichever site meets the criteria and works, y'all would make that decision, and then the board would decide. That, to me, is a better solution, not just for this site, but for other areas. Rezoning it, we are definitely opposed to, and we do not feel it meets the criteria. Thank you.
I have a question
Thank you
for
for
you.
your time.
1 second.
Yes, sir.
Were you on the Preservation Board when it was changed to R60?
No, sir. No, that was before I was on the, it was, I believe, according to your staff report, it was done in 1999 and 2001, and I was not on the Preservation Board at the time. I was on the Preservation Board when that area, the fruit salad area, was expanded and brought into being part of the historic district, and I would suggest to you that if it hadn't been rezoned and gone to single-family zoning, we would have not had many of those houses and not had enough of them to be able to be a historic district.
So the fruit and salad district is RM60 now?
It's RS60 according to the zoning map that I got from the city. Yes, sir. The only CRM is to the north, which is, like I said, it's the park. And why the park is CRM doesn't make any sense. But
I think it's listed because it's a library and museum.
Excuse me?
It's got a library and museum on that property, so that's probably why it's listed as a CRM. Or it was a library at one point, and it's a museum. That's why it's one of the conditional uses in the CRM stated on there, so that's probably why.
Maybe so. I guess I thought that you could have a park and a museum in R60, but maybe not.
Okay. Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is Harriet Kladakis, and I live on 215 West Lemon Street, and I represent my neighbors. They could not come, so they sent me instead. We are very much against changing the zoning. Just put yourselves in a place. If you lived on a historical society and you changed it, you wouldn't like it. We don't like it. We are faced bad enough with the homeless, with whatever is going on around our neighborhood. We don't need another bed and breakfast. There's one by the AHEPA. And all these hotels you're talking about and all the others, these are business district. It's not within the neighborhood. It's not with residences. If you're going to make one exception, then you should make one for me. I have vacant lots. Then I'll build a building and I'll make a bed and breakfast. Why not? It's right there on Lemon Street. I have vacant lots. I'll build and make it a bed and breakfast. And when we moved to Tarpon Springs, that house was a residence, was not. And if the price for the sale is going down, it's because of the economy. That's why they keep dropping it down, not because the houses next door are rented. I don't know the people, I don't have anything against them, but we like to leave it as a historical neighborhood. And I agree with Mrs. Protos. History should come first. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against this? Do you want to come up? No. Mike, did you want to come up again? Or okay. Seeing no one else who wishes to speak against this, I will now have people come forward who wish to speak for it. You have 4 minutes each. Please give us your name and address.
It's Olga Sauchuk, 232 West Lemon Street, Tarpon Springs. I'm not an adjacent neighbor, but I do live in the neighborhood, part of the area that was recently changed into a historic preservation district. My comments, I have an issue with the spot zoning aspect. I think it would have been much better to go a different route, maybe through the R60. But that said, I still think that that some of the arguments about it being like they used the word transient in a little flyer I got. Bed and breakfast don't bring transients in the same way that maybe a crummy motel does. I don't have any fear about this use changing. My biggest gripe was that they didn't include the whole the whole neighborhood, in the block. The reason I say that is I was with the planning department when we changed it to R60. And if I have a regret, it was changing my own home from RM something to R60, because now I'm very limited in my own use of my own home. But I'm not really against this if this is the course of action that this board wants to take and rezone it there. But I do think that I would agree with the other recommendations that they take a different look and maybe look at the code and change the code so that many of us could take advantage of the same opportunity.
Todd Eckhouse, 103 South Spring Boulevard. Our home is located as contiguous to the subject property to the east. We made a significant investment for us to renovate it on what was kind of a slummy-looking house. And I don't know about the mechanism, that should or shouldn't be used to permit a bed and breakfast, but I support the concept of a bed and breakfast, and whether or not, whatever mechanism is used, the R60 or however it's done, it doesn't matter to me, but I think that a bed and breakfast is good. I think that it brings business to the town. Right now, if we have more than one couple visit us, we don't have any place to send them except to the 1910 Inn. That's the only place that I would send anybody in Tarpon Springs. The city has, however that happened, I don't know how it happened, but certainly the Golden Triangle wasn't protected when those other two properties were permitted, the motel and then, the two motels there, because they are a big problem. And I agree that that's something that the city needs to do, probably somehow do something about. But as far as my experience with bed and breakfast is they tend to attract good people. I don't think they generally have problems. The ones that we've stayed in have pretty much always been more or less in residential areas. And so I stand in support of it. And I would say right now I'm the one neighbor that would be most affected by this. In a negative way, if there is a negative. And I don't personally feel that there is, so I stand in support of it.
Are you speaking for it?
I'm confused as far as what the issue is. The issue's been
Okay,
put
give us
forth
your name
as
again.
far as
Name
the
and
zone.
address
Okay,
first.
again, Carolyn Root, 203 South Spring Boulevard, Tarpon Springs. If this discussion is about the bed and breakfast, I am firmly in support of that use. I think we have to look at, going forward, how these large properties are going to be utilized in the long run. Now, it is, of course, wonderful when you have people who can afford to live in them as single-family homes and maintain them as single-family homes. But as the Shoals have seen, after trying for 6 years, and I think the last 3 or 4 years, having it very affordably priced, they can't sell it. That's going to be, and there's been other properties on the bayou that have faced the same problem. We've had one that's on North Spring Boulevard that's been for sale for a very long time. So having a property that's not lived in is not good. Having a property that is listed for sale for years and years says negative things about the area. My experience with the Shoals and what they've done, it's been positive. I've met some of the people that have stayed with them. Lovely people. I really echo the fact that this does bring a very positive element to our community. It stimulates business. It's not been a detriment from what I've seen. And I live 4 doors down from them. The zoning is the issue for me, not the bed and breakfast. And that's what I wanted to be very, very clear on. I think there's another way to go. Rodney said there was another way to go, but we have not heard about that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for this? Yes, ma'am, please. Name and address.
My name is Elizabeth Riggs, and I live at the subject property. I am married to Don Scholl. About a year ago, we heard about a company called Airbnb. Have any of you on this board heard of Airbnb? May I see a show of hands if you have? Okay. Airbnb is a worldwide organization that allows people like Don and I who have larger homes with a lot of extra bedrooms that are vacant most of the time, unless we have family visit. It allows us to rent those rooms out for short-term rentals. When I read about it a year ago, I was amazed at the concept, and I thought, well, this is something we should have thought about a long time ago. We have these tremendous resources, these huge homes that are just sitting, and they're largely vacant except for those of us, the empty nesters, who own them. So we decided to try it, and as some of you may know, we live in Colorado 6 months out of the year. So we tried it in Colorado, and it was an amazing success, and we were amazed at the quality of the people that came to stay with us. Airbnb does a tremendous amount of verification and validation of the people that reserve a place to stay, like my place. They have to go through this pretty stringent vetting process, far greater than anything that you would see with a motel or a B&B. We did it in Colorado for the 6 months that we were there this summer and fall, and it was very successful. This was our first time attempting it here in Tarpon at our residence, and we were testing the market. We didn't know if there was going to be a tremendous demand for it, but what we found out is that there's a tremendous demand in Tarpon Springs for quality places to stay. And we were very busy. I operate this myself. I live in this home while I'm operating it. So you can imagine that it's hugely important to me that whoever I'm renting a room to is going to be someone who can be trusted, who is a high-quality person. I have a lot of value in that house. And it would be very easy for someone to rip me off if they were not an honest, trustworthy person. I have 3 rooms that I rent out. The maximum number of people that I can have at any given time is 6 people. That's all I can handle is 6 people because I do all the work myself. I clean the rooms, I wash the bathrooms, I do all the laundry, and I cook the breakfast. I am the innkeeper. All I can say is if this isn't the right way to go, and if people in our neighborhood are very concerned about a rezoning, and I can understand that, then if there is another way to approach this, I would really implore this body to look at whatever alternatives might be available to us. Our home has been for sale for 8 years, And during those 8 years, we have kept it up extraordinarily well. There has been no slippage whatsoever in the maintenance of our property. We are committed to the Golden Crescent District. We are committed to preserving our house and our entire neighborhood, and we want to continue to be good neighbors. So again, I implore you, if there is another way to look at this, we ask for your judgment on that and to please help us. Thank you.
I want to ask you a question, please.
Yes,
If
ma'am.
I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This Airbnb, are these people from Europe? Are they from?
They're
here?
from all over the world. Airbnb has over 100,000 hosts, people like me, all over the world. If you were to go on Airbnb and just type in wherever you wanted to go, you would be astonished at the beauty of the places that are offered on Airbnb. And it's all people just like Don and I. We live there. You know, these people live there. They love their homes and they want to share them with other people.
Rodney, I asked this question because, and I think Mrs. Socek will remember this also, we had a problem with people renting their homes to people from Europe and coming here and staying. So does that Airbnb fall under that zoning and that category? We had to outlaw it here in Tarpon Springs. And that's something we need to look at, board members, because it posed to be quite a problem in neighborhoods. And this was a few years back. We put a stop to that because
Excuse me, what was it that they did?
they were renting out their homes in Sunset Hills area and throughout Tarpon Springs from Europe. Yes, they were. They were renting from Europe, and the people were coming over here and staying, and they were in different developments throughout Tarpon Springs, and it didn't work out good, and the city changed the zoning and changed the rule on that.
The city enacted a tourist home ordinance that
Yeah.
basically ratcheted down the ability for short-term rentals in certain residential districts.
So we need to look at that too, because it may be illegal in this area.
I think what you're referring
Okay,
to is probably VRBO, vacation rental by owner. That is not what Airbnb
No,
is.
I know, but it's
Yeah.
still the same thing. They're coming over here and
Okay.
staying,
And,
and it falls
Don
under the...
Schultz-
We want to go ahead and wrap this up.
Okay,
No.
just one thing, because there's some concern still out here about the kind of people, but the people that come from Airbnb, we have a $100,000 policy they've got to give us. So if somebody is, you know, when you go to Motel 8 or wherever you go, Drury Inn or whatever, you don't put up that kind of, they have a bond for $100,000 that they're responsible. So you just immediately there with the Airbnb traffic, you are into a different category of individual.
But it's still the same issue that they had when we had to put this zoning, this
Well, that was a different
ordinance.
thing. That was
No, it's the
talking
same
about
thing.
every
Okay.
month they would rent
Same
turn
thing.
over.
Can we wrap this up? Okay.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay,
I have one more
wait.
question I'd like to ask you before you walk
Okay.
away. Just out of curiosity, at your house, are you going to have any kind of signage or anything out front advertising this as a B&B, or is it going to look like a home that the people that are supplying you with customers will just know the address to come to?
When we get our approvals, then we'll get the sign designed through the historical board and then put a sign up.
All
But
right.
we think that Airbnb is going to be our primary source of, you know.
Okay. Okay, you have used your time.
Okay.
Yes, please. I want to recall Mrs. Tarpon to the lectern, please.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Tarpon, you have been on the Preservation Board for a number of years, and you're a professional. And what What is your opinion on the impact this is going to have on the RM60 and the historic area?
Well,
Maybe you've told us, maybe you can just re-summarize it.
in my mind, the CRM zoning that is proposed is not appropriate for this site. It's spot zoning. It will be detrimental to the neighborhood because there are all sorts of uses that are allowed in CRM that are not allowed in R60. And I left my notes back there, but emergency shelters, treatment facilities for mentally disabled, for they're basically what you would call a halfway house, drug addiction. All those are allowed as conditional uses, and you're introducing that kind of a use. And I know that's not what they're saying they're going to do, but they're not going to own the property forever. And so, but zoning is forever. And so what I'm saying is that the CRM zoning we are opposed to, my husband and I. If there's another way to allow a B&B, I think there is a way to do that. There's a couple different ways. One simple way would be to put a B&B as a conditional use in the R60 zoning district, and you'd have criteria associated with that. You know, we're not here to debate that today, but I think if that's the goal that they're saying their goal is, that's one option. The zoning opens up a humongous can of worms for problems for the neighborhood, and it's just not appropriate, and it's not consistent with your comp plan. Like I said, you know, let's say they do sell it for a B&B and that person operates it for a while. There's no restriction that requires them or the next owner to keep it as a B&B. They can do any of those uses that are in CRM. That's my concern. So I had suggested, you know, and Rodney and Renee can figure out the best way to do it, but it seems to me a simple way to do that, to allow B&Bs generally in the city, would be to add it as a conditional use, develop the criteria that is appropriate, that you have enough parking, that you don't have a sign. I mean, it is a residential area, and nobody has signs in their houses, so, you know, whatever those criteria are, figure that out, and then you can, each application would come through, and you would judge that particular application, whether it met the criteria for a B&B at that location. Not every site will work for a B&B. Many sites will, and then y'all can decide, you know, if it's appropriate on a case-by-case basis. But in my opinion, the zoning is the problem, and that's what you're being asked for today. All this, I mean, it's nice what they're doing about doing a B&B, except for one little detail, that it's currently illegal, is what they're, I mean, I'm sorry, guys, but what they're doing today is not allowed under the code. It's a violation, it's a code enforcement violation.
Okay, thank you.
I have a little comment to say. I was on the Historic Preservation Board, and they did have signs. They had plaques placed on certain homes that met certain criteria, and there was some type of a signage, so that was an incorrect statement that you said.
No, what I said was, I think you need to decide, if you decide to go the route of having a conditional use for a B&B, then you need to decide when and where a sign's appropriate. On Tarpon Avenue, for the 1910 Inn, it's a commercial zoning district, a sign's appropriate. In a residential neighborhood, I'm not so sure a freestanding sign's appropriate. But that's really, again, that's not your issue tonight. Tonight your issue is the zoning appropriate or not for all the possible uses that are in that zoning district, not just the one use that they're contemplating, because I'm sure I know they're well-intentioned and they may intend to do that for a few years, and maybe they sell it to somebody that's a B&B. But that does not guarantee that it's going to be a B&B, and other uses that are in that CRM will ultimately lead to inappropriate changes to the building, and ultimately somebody saying, well, this building really doesn't work anymore to put an emergency shelter in. We need to have a bigger building. We need to demolish this historic building. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's where that's headed. I'm not saying that Don and Lisa are proposing that. I'm just saying that's what it opens up. That's the Pandora's box you're opening up.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Protus?
To correct Mr. Savopoulos' statement, the plaques or signs on homes in Tarpon Springs were to denote historic homes. They weren't for businesses. It wasn't allowed. It denotes which home is historic.
I never said businesses. I said residences.
Yeah, but those plaques were approved for historic homes.
That's absolutely correct, and this is a historic home.
Okay.
And, you know...
Bill, you want to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay, give us your name, address.
Bill Kladakis, 215 West Lemon Street, Tarpon Springs. My fine neighbor here. we put a lot of money in our property. We didn't have a lot of money, but we worked hard for it. The city sure makes it hard for us. The different zones, zone this and zone that. What I'm trying to say is, I know he's going to screen the people, he's going to handpick them. We never had any problem from that block. The only problem we have is a city park. All the homeless, you can't even walk your dogs at night over there. They are sleeping in the streets, in the sidewalks, by the old library. They even got blankets. That's what you got to worry about. Clean up the park, and everybody will, all the riffraff will be gone. But like I said, this is the American dream. Where he left. Okay, there he is. I think this is the American dream. I remember when he moved down there. I think the house was selling at that time was about $60,000 back in the early 70s. Am I correct? Thank you. So now I built mine in 73, just a block over. So that's all I got to say is we didn't have a lot of money. Here I'm looking at the board, college graduates, everything, and everything was kind of handed to them. Nobody, yeah, you.
I think we worked for it.
You too.
We worked for what
I
we
went to
had.
school with you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my dad got killed early, so I had to do what I could, and that's what I'm saying. But the man's going to handpick them. Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and open up a discussion by this board and see where we stand on this application.
Call the question.
Who's going to start for discussion?
We can start with Ronnie and
My first question is going to be,
You got to use the microphone.
oh, sorry about that. I tend to think that the bed and breakfast is not a bad thing, but I think changing the zoning is not a good idea. I think what I'd like to find out, Rodney, is if maybe we could do a change on the 60 where we can do a condition for a bed and breakfast versus changing the zoning for that one piece of property. I don't like the idea of changing the zoning to the, the 75 or whatever it is. I don't like the idea of changing that one parcel to that zone and everybody else being the 60. I would rather make a condition for the 60s to allow bed and breakfast. I would much prefer that. I would feel comfortable with that. Changing the one parcel, I'm not comfortable with. So I would suggest that I might say no to this, hoping that this would go back and maybe change the 60 to where bed and breakfast is a condition.
okay, Mr. Parker, anything else?
Nope, I'm done.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
I agree with Mr. Park. I think this needs to be taken back to the drawing board and revisited, and all these issues need to be corrected from internally and represented again. Thank you.
Mr. Carr?
It's not a bed and breakfast issue right now, it's a zoning issue. So when you look at the R60, like some stuff was brought up earlier about daycare centers and daycare homes, those are both in the R60 and in the CRM as conditional uses. And actually with the CRM, you have less permitted issues than you do in the R60 also, so it actually cuts that back, but then it also increases the conditional use. It's about the future land use aspect of it, what is going to come in 20 years down the road in this aspect. We don't know. We aren't able to see that far ahead. We would like it to stay the way it is, but we don't know what's going to come up. I would love to see Tarpon continue to grow in the direction, in a better direction, and the issue is, I think, with the zoning. I'm just going along with the rest of the board right now with what the comments have been said. Is I think it sounds like a zoning issue overall, not a bed and breakfast issue. Because if you go to Charleston, if you go to St. Augustine, if you go to Savannah, I don't think you're going to have issues of detriment for the historic areas for bed and breakfast issues there. But again, it's not about a bed and breakfast issue tonight. It's about a zoning issue tonight, it sounds like. And that's what it looks like.
Well, that's what it is.
Okay. Mr. Vincent?
I don't know if it's being a lawyer or just being a political conservative, but to me, the process is important. And due process of law, and the laws are there in place for a reason. And I personally don't have a problem with a bed and breakfast. I like to stay in bed and breakfast when I go traveling. I don't travel enough, but I do like bed and breakfast, and if Mr. Scholl's house became a bed and breakfast, I don't think it would be detrimental to the neighborhood. But that's not the issue tonight. I don't think that zoning one particular property, a little property, and is the proper way to go about it. I'm against spot zoning. I think this does fall within the definition of spot zoning, and but I'm not against the concept. But I don't think the ends justifies the means. A lot of people would disagree with that, but I think we need to do the process the right way. Thank you.
Ms. St. Arnold?
I also am not, I am in favor of your bed and breakfast. My husband and I also stay in bed and breakfast. We've done them all over the world. But again, I think the zoning is the issue at this point, and, we can't do for one if we can't do for them all. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this.
Ms. Protas?
Okay. I'm concerned about a conditional use in this because when he sells his house with his conditional use, we don't know in the future what those property owners are going to come and ask attached to that conditional use. And to rezone it, as we have here tonight, is wrong. And we must all remember to be diligent about protecting the golden crescent of what we have in this community. Because once it's gone again, you don't get it back. And whatever we rezone in a conditional use, it's going to be expanded on. I can guarantee that. Because they're not going to pay money for a home and not be able to come back and go a little further and a little further. We have to say, and I do believe in a bed and breakfast, and I think Tarpon has areas where they can have them. But do we want them there? Do we want a bed and breakfast there? And what's going to happen in the future when we're not here? We must protect the community. And that's why I feel we should ask that the motion tonight should be to reject the application of number 1420 because it is not suitable for what they're asking and for the protection of what we have there.
I want to ask staff, Rodney, if this property were destroyed, let's say a hurricane came through and was destroyed, and the zoning had been changed to what is being asked for, what can you put in there then? I mean, can you put a 4-story structure that's
it's still whatever would
attics?
be rebuilt or proposed to be rebuilt would have to go through a review and approval by the city's Heritage Preservation Board, first of all. And depending on if it still remains in R60, then the maximum height would be 35 feet. If it's CRM, multifamily and non-residential uses are allowed up to 45 feet.
Is that with the 7.5?
Yeah, the CRM
Up to 45 feet.
It does give you a little bit more height for.
Which is
multifamily.
essentially like 3 stories.
Yeah, maybe a little higher.
So, I mean, you could make it brick and mortar. I mean,
I doubt the Heritage Preservation Board would approve that.
It'd have to look like.
Yeah, it would, yeah,
Similar to
I
what
could
it
almost
is now.
guarantee you it would have to be rebuilt pretty much like it looks today.
But it would be bigger, higher.
Not necessarily.
Mr. Chairman, this isn't relevant to the issue before us.
Yes, it is.
No, let's call for a vote.
It's the future. I hope that this is the future. My opinion is we have to protect the area. There's a reason this was changed to R60. And I agree with several members. They talk about spot zoning. This is a beautiful home. We know that. Everybody knows that. It's a lot of work has gone into it. I know Mr. Scholl has been through a very difficult period. But if you allow this for one person, then you have to open it up for everybody. And I mean, to me, that's contrary to fair play. And wherever that falls into the legality and non-legality, everything is not clear cut. There are a lot of gray areas, and if you want to talk about gray areas, you can talk about law, because everybody has seen this. You can go one way or the other, depending on what case studies you want to bring up and who is the best speaker, the most convincing in an argument that can make his case. So this is a difficult decision in a difficult situation. So I'm going to open up and entertain a motion for this application at this time.
I move that application 1420 be denied on the basis of what we have stated, spot zoning and not good, a good change for the area.
What about the future of the future of the city?
And the future of the city, the historic significance of the Golden Crescent.
And just from a legal perspective, let me break in here real quick. The motion would be to recommend denial to the
Yes,
board.
recommend denial.
Okay,
But
fine.
he asked me, and that's why I answered him.
All right, I'm waiting for a second.
Can you specify a little bit more on not good for the area, what you mean by that?
Second the motion.
It's been seconded. Okay, go ahead, ask your question.
I'm just curious. I was trying to figure out when you said a detriment to the area, what that meant.
It's what comes under it, what's going to happen there. Then
Okay,
you
I
can
just
look
wanted
at
to-
it a little bit better and be more restrictive with any change for a bed and breakfast.
Okay. I was,
She
you
has
can have
spoken
5 of them down there in no time.
One second. She has spoken extensively on this tonight.
I understand.
Okay, I know you're here, you're listening. All right. We're now going to vote on it. Roll call.
Mr. Chairman.
No, we're going to vote.
Is it yes?
Roll call.
Against?
Mrs. Protos?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. St. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Vinson?
Yes.
Chairman Francis?
Yes. Okay. Thank you all very much.
You need to know. You have to go to the zoning
Go to the
department,
city.
find out tomorrow. Yeah.
I don't think we can change your
We can't do
application.
that. We
I
can't
don't
do
think
that.
we can do that,
Yeah,
Don.
Mr. Scholl, the application moves forward to the city commission with that recommendation of denials. So it'll go to the city commission on May 6th, will be the next public hearing. We can talk to you about that between now and then.
Yeah. I didn't agree to this.
Okay, we have to move on, Mr. Scholl. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks.
We're open now for staff comments.
No comments?
Any board comments?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Vincent?
Tonight's meeting has been very far-ranging, and in my view, a lot of things, and I think it would be helpful if the board would keep to the agenda the way we're supposed to do it when we ask, questions for the applicant, that we direct questions to the applicant. It's not a time to to argue a point. It's time to ask questions. When it's time to ask staff, that's when we ask staff the questions. It seems like throughout this meeting, we got off track.
Yes.
And we're doing different things and not keeping right to the point of,
Right.
what's the issue?
But you're correct, and you're talking about a strict quasi-judicial procedure where we do ask questions, we don't give opinions, and I would say that's correct. And sometimes we do have issues that are very sensitive, very emotional.
Well, I
And
understand.
I don't care if it's Tarpon Springs or Newport Richie, we are people. We have feelings. These things are going to come out. I
understand
know
that, but
exactly
we're
what
the
you're
judge.
saying.
We're the judge, and we need to follow a procedure.
Right.
And we shouldn't be saying how we're going to vote before we even hear any testimony.
That's correct.
I mean, that is not right.
That is correct. It's because some of our new people do not know that particular aspect of a quasi-judicial meeting. That's exactly right. I agree with that. Yes, and at the end, the judge can say whatever he wants. So
Well, after we've heard all the testimony, when you close all the testimony and then it's time for comments, then we can deliberate and say whatever we think, what we thought about the witnesses, what we thought about the evidence. That's when we do that.
Well, we did that too.
Well, if you're referring to the little bit of history that I gave on this, it's because we have new people on the board that do not know the history of the Golden Crescent in the historical aspect of it.
I think we needed to know and get viewpoints from people like the people on the Historic Preservation Board. Some of these people have been on that board 10 years, and I think we need to hear from them what their opinion is.
I think what was dangerous tonight, if this had passed, I can guarantee in a year you're going to have 5 B&Bs down around the bayou.
Well, maybe more.
Yeah.
Okay. Entertain a motion to close the meeting, adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. We're done.